The tail fin looks like you're almost there. Tell me how much is original here?
On this section here, all the metal here, the fin itself, that's original, and the pillar post inside here, the main structural part of the rudder. We've rebuilt the framework inside here, but also as well, a very important skill that we have within the museum is the Irish linen, putting the old fabric back on, doping it down, making it nice and taut, as you can see on here. It sounds like a bit like a drum compared to the more tinny sound of the metal.
Excellent. And of course, the plane came down because it was in a firefight.
Yep.
What can we tell from the damage that is still visible on this bit of the fuselage?
Well, this sort of typical damage here, you can see it's quite uniform, square, rectangle, normally around about 1 inch in size. Typically that would be shrapnel damage. So basically a shell's been fired from the ground, come up, exploded near the aircraft, gone through. Typically just punches holes straight in through the aeroplane. Something that's slightly more different shape, maybe like this sort of piece here, say, that's probably with impact with the ground, maybe a branch, tree, something like that when it's coming down. Slightly different damage, so you can see sort of the difference straight away between natural damage and the shrapnel damage. This is the weak point of the Hampden. Most of our Hampden crashes, you see it's snapped here, frame 24, and where it goes into the tail boom. You can see we've got quite significant damage around here, but also again, some more shrapnel damage. Good hit by the shrapnel, straight in the middle of the roundel. And this is going to be the big problem for us when we have to rebuild this section here. We've got a frame by here, which is frame 25, frame 24. Early thoughts at the moment is to get both drawings and make up a new frame, sort of 24A frame, halfway between, and insert that in, and then we can reskin over the top. That's the early thought. But again, this area here takes a lot of weight of the airplane, so we'll have to consider the thickness of the materials, things like that.
And internally, would there have been any crew members at this point, or?
No, the crew members would end about here. This is where Daniel Garrity, Sergeant Daniel Garrity would have been. Sadly, he was one of the ones that was killed during the air battle. He was on board as possibly might have been a wireless operator as well, but his role was air gunner. That's where he would have been firing from. Again here, what you've got on the side here is actually some of the rounds shot from the Messerschmitt 109s that engaged the aeroplane, some of the bullet holes dotted around here. The wireless operator, Sergeant James Morton Robertson, was firing from the upper position here. We haven't got the guns in, but that was his position here. Sadly, he was also killed during the air battle. Coming sort of further forward on the aeroplane, and one of the early modifications actually on the Hampden, it come out with this all brand new aeroplane, could fire from the front, could fire back, but all of a sudden realised had no what they call down the beam, down the wing, so they quickly put a mod in here to allow another gun to be fitted in here. Not sure if it was used during the air battle. Bit cumbersome because you had one gun, single gun, you had to connect it into the fit in this side. If the German aircraft were coming from the other side, you'd have to disconnect, throw that out into the air and try and connect it all back up as well before firing. So it's quite a bit of a thing. But when you consider then as well the width here, typically the Hampden here is about 3 foot wide. Then when you put all the framework inside, you're really narrowing it down. And this is where beyond this door that Daniel Garrity would have been down there. Robertson would have been using the radios there, 1154, 1155, long range sets for talking to people. This here where we're standing now is where the wing would have come through. This is where the wing box. So Corporal George Shepherd, who was the techie, would have been sat probably about here at the front end of the wing box. They did have a chemical toilet on board, so George probably could have used it, and the two guys in here. When we look at the forward fuselage, you can see it's only 3 foot wide. Highly unlikely that the pilot could actually get out of his seat and actually use the chemical toilet. They did have a door as well.
Yes.
So they could have a little bit of privacy.
Bit of privacy for the chemical toilet, wonderful. And, I mean, it is quite narrow inside. Would there have been much freedom of movement, or would they pretty much be locked in their positions? The
observer who was on the aircraft, he had to climb down underneath the pilot's seat, and then the pilot's seat sort of cranked his seat back into position. So really, he had quite a big compartment, probably about the same sort of size as for the two guys here, but once he was in, that was it.
And typically, how long would a flight have been? Obviously, this plane sadly didn't do many missions.
The logbooks I've seen for the flight out to Russia of the aircraft that made it there, we're talking between 7.5, 8 hours. It's a long time. Yeah. Right on the operational limit. Around about 8.5 hours, I think, probably maximum for Hampden.
Yeah. And are these controls here? They look original? Are they, what kind of?
They're two original
Did they
radio
have
boxes up there, yeah, of the type that would have been used. They used an older set, so some of the modifications that were carried out on the Hampden was to put in, for those days, the more modern radio sets. And so the 1154, 1155, that was their numbers. I think they've replaced the 1082, 1083. Hopefully I got the right numbers.
Sounds convincing.
Yeah.
Excellent.
What there's still, even though it looks quite narrow in here as well, across here you'd have accumulator batteries. What we called in here, you'd have some nitrogen bottles. These little spigots here were all the pouches for the ammo sats, and you can see there's lots dotted around. So basically what I'm saying then, down here you'd have pipe work, air conditioning pipes, things like that. Everything's just compressing, you know, it's narrow now. When we finish off putting everything in, it's going to be very, very tight in there. Had to be good friends.
Absolutely. Great.
Well,
Well,
one of the nice things we get to do, and certainly myself, is one of the best parts of the job is, well, we meet a lot of veterans. And over the years, I've probably met George earlier, who was on this aeroplane, but I've met other air crew and ground crew, people from the factories that manufactured. Met a gentleman called Fred Bailey. He was shot down on a Hampden as well, over France, and he spent the rest of the war in Camp 3. But he was telling me when he came to see us, so he said, yes, because we simulated, this is not the proper controls, we just put some string in just to see the run. He said, oh yes, yeah, the flying controls. He said, used to get bored on the aeroplanes. He said 15,000 feet, we're on our way onto an ops. He said, used to keep the pilot awake, twanging the cable. He said, you know, he used to get some nice little comments down the headset to me.
Yeah, it brings it to life.
Yeah, it just brings it up. You meet these people, and you know, the sad thing is they've all lost friends. Huge percentage of bomber commands, 55,500 were lost during the war. So they all know, had friends that were killed during the war. But it's nice to hear the day-to-day stories that you get to hear. So I think it was the week before we were due to meet Fred. They'd also found that Ben Dixon, who was the other guy that survived the crash, his air gunner was still alive, and so they made contact. Sadly, Fred has passed away since. But so you know, it's a great little part of our job, meeting the veterans. We met some young ladies as well that come from, who used to work in the factories doing the fabric work that we were looking at. Yeah, she come here, one lady worked up at Salisbury, up near Preston, that area, and she donated her darning needle that she kept all the years to the Hampden project. So yeah, we got nice little things, not just aircraft. George Shepherd, who was a techie that was sat up here, we've got all his training manuals from his training days, which I think were down at RAF St Athan, all handwritten. So great, you know, personally from my side, great being a techie.
Thank you, Darren.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
So yeah, where we're standing now, wing box here, then we're coming over to the sort of forward fuselage here. But what's probably worth having a little look at as well is the forward fuselage recovered, and you probably can see why we decided and elected to go ahead and rebuild a new one from the manufacturer's drawings. This really was what was recovered.
So this is all.
This is original
left.
P1344 aircraft. Yeah. That's what's left of it. Yeah. So yes, we could have incorporated that in, but I think when the project's made, that helps to tell the story. If you see a nice shiny long aircraft, you maybe lose the sense of the story. When you see this crash parts, it all brings it to life.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So what's been manufactured in the last sort of 12 months is the forward fuselage. Here again, as I mentioned in the use of the handy page drawings, photographs that we've got from the time. And when you do meet the veterans, if they come in, ask them, does it look right? Do you remember anything? We've missed anything out? You know, the great source of information. But typically when you look inside, so you can just sort of see how narrow the aeroplane is. The pilot's seat, he's quite a high seat actually. He sat up there looking out, grand view. So that's where Pilot Officer Perry would have been. Yes. And down in here, again, to say, quite a large compartment down here. And this is where Flight Sergeant Gordon Miller, he was Canadian. He survived the air battle, but sadly he was killed when the aircraft crash landed. Really what we're looking at here on the front now is a plexiglass, a little bit of glass, the majority of it perspex type stuff. So not a lot to protect him when he come in crash landing. Yeah. Very, very sad. But again, it's a great reproduction going on in here. We're getting light. This is a light. This here would have been the seat he would have been using, swivel seats. Same on the one at the back rear fuselage. We've got the replica instrument panel built up there, so that's the blind flying panel for the pilot for all his instruments to eventually go in. One of the guns as well up there, that's the fixed forward firing. That was for the pilot. Sandy Page actually, when they advertised this aircraft, advertised it as a fighter bomber. pilot that had quite a grand, good view
Yes.
and a fixed gun to fire. So yeah, he was a bit like the fighter pilots. Could actually engage aircraft from his position as well.